Hello, Psych 101 students. Welcome to Module 6, Chapter 12, Learning Objective 2. We'll finish off the question, how do you think about other people? By looking at the tendency to stereotype and negative effects of stereotypes. So a stereotype is a belief about the characteristics of members of a group that is applied generally to most members of the group. Stereotypes can help us to process information easily and quickly, just like all schemas do, but they can also lead to errors and to prejudice. Once we form stereotypes, we tend to maintain them by perceiving behaviors in ways that are consistent with our stereotype. If we believe, if we have a stereotype that we believe in, then we will notice when people match that stereotype, and it will, support our view of the stereotype being correct. People are often not conscious of their stereotypes. They're also unaware of the influence of stereotypes on their perceptions. Their actual perceptions, how you perceive things. Stereotypes' influence on perception may produce negative outcomes. So in one study, shown in the picture here, it was a study by Payne, 2001. And in this study, white participants were subliminally shown a picture of a white face or a picture of a black face. So they're looking at a screen, and when I say subliminally, I mean the face would flash so quickly that you were consciously unaware of what you had seen. And this is taking us back to the difference between sensation and perception. I mean, even when something is flashed really quickly, it still enters into your brain, and reaches the point of sensation where you have sensed the picture and it has gone into your brain, but you cannot actually perceive it. You don't know what you actually saw. So they flash the picture really quick. So it does enter into your brain, but you don't know what you've seen consciously. And then the participants were immediately shown a picture of an object and asked to classify it as a gun or a tool, as shown in the picture here. And the task was to do it as quick as possible. Participants that were primed by seeing black faces identified guns more quickly, compared to if you had seen a white face. And they were more likely to mistake tools for guns. So the study revealed that stereotypes can influence basic perceptual processes. So you don't even know which face you saw, and yet if you saw the black face, you identified guns more quickly and you made more mistakes calling tools a gun, compared to if you had seen a white face. So the effect is it's affecting, your actual perceptual processing, what you actually are, what you're actually seeing and perceiving. Well, not really seeing, but what you're actually perceiving, which is, pretty amazing. Something that you're not even aware of is influencing, your perception of objects. Then there was the Colgate University campus lockdown in 2017. This was caused because somebody reported you know, a student with a gun, and they locked down the university campus. It was a big deal, and it was a black student holding a glue gun on his way to an art project. He's carrying the glue gun along with him, and similar to this other study we saw, it was misperceived as a weapon, and the I'm sure if it had been a white student carrying a glue gun, it would have been perceived differently. As it says in the textbook, it is possible that the influence of stereotypes on perception may play a role in the shooting of unarmed black men, because we can, because it's very easy to misperceive things, because your perception is being influenced by your stereotypes. So a self-fulfilling prophecy refers to people's tendency to behave in ways that confirm their own expectations or other people's expectations. And the Rosenthal and Jacobson 1968 Bloomers study is a classic example demonstrating the self-fulfilling prophecy effect. Basically, what happened was Rosenthal was a psychologist. Jacobson was a principal at a school. And at the beginning of the school year, they had all the elementary students take a test that would supposedly show which students were especially likely to show an increase in IQ during the year. And these students with high potential to increase their IQ were labeled bloomers. And each teacher was given a list of the bloomers that were in their class. And sure enough, at the end of the school year, the bloomers did indeed show IQ increases. The thing is, though, that the bloomers were actually just chosen randomly. They weren't actually based on the test, or they were just randomly chosen. And the reason that they showed IQ increases, I mean, because there was nothing special about them, they're just randomly chosen, was because the teachers expected them to. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The teachers actually made it happen. And it just shows that, if you have expectations like, oh, this student's supposed to be really good, I mean, the teachers would probably encourage them more. They might give them extra help, and they would, in one way or another, the teachers treated these so-called bloomers differently, leading to them fulfilling the prophecy that their IQs would increase. And so this shows that as it says in the bottom line there, the self-fulfilling prophecy creates both positive and negative teachers' expectations for students. It can work either way. If you believe a student, if you're led to believe that a student's going to do great things, or is gifted in some way, then you'll probably do things to help make that happen. And similarly, if you believe a student, um, isn't very bright or doesn't have much to offer, you're going to do things that actually cause them to do poorly. And and this is not on a conscious level. This is not like teachers are trying to, you know, harm students in certain ways, but it'll be little things all through the year. Like the student that you don't have expectations for, their hand goes up, and another student that you think has more potential, they put their hand up, so you call on them, and sooner, after a while, the student that you're not calling on, they kind of stop putting their hand up, and stop trying, and their grades go down, and so expectations play a large role in how students behave and how teachers interact with students. Okay. Stereotype threat. It's the worry or fear about confirming negative stereotypes related to a person's own group. It causes distraction and anxiety, interfering with performance by affecting memory and motivation. So the stereotype threat is when you belong to some kind of um, typically like some kind of minority group, uh, and especially one that has stereotypes attached to it. Then you can when you get tested, um, you believe that you're being judged, according to your your minority group that you belong to. It's like, oh, if I don't do well, it's gonna be because I'm a black student, for instance, and and not much is expected of us, and so it's actually going to cause a hindrance to their performance because of the anxiety that possibly living up to a stereotype is causing them. This was a study done here, it's shown on the screen. They had black and white students um, take a test under two different conditions. Um, in the first condition, called diagnostic, the test was described as diagnostic of intellectual ability. Um, so, like, the students were told this test is going to show, your intellectual ability. It's going to measure it, and this is certainly, this condition was meant to lead to stereotype threat, and it did, and you can see how poorly the black students performed compared to the white students because of stereotype threat. It's like, oh no, this is going to reveal, if I don't do well, it's going to be like, oh, because I'm a black student. And when in another condition, they describe the test as non-diagnostic, basically like this doesn't tell us anything about you. Just do your best. It's but it doesn't reveal anything about you. So it was it was downplayed, the importance of it, and you can see in that condition the black and white students performed pretty much equally, and so there are ways to eliminate stereotype threat. But and by the way, just to give a couple of other examples, it doesn't only apply to ethnicity. It's usually when we talk about stereotype threat, it's the most common usage, but it can be, for instance, let's say a woman that's going for her auto mechanic license, which is a much more male dominated field, and and that woman could easily experience stereotype threat. If I don't do well, they're going to say it's because I'm a woman. And I often think of the first major sports umpires or referees or linesmen or whatever that um, the first pioneers, that when women started to do in those positions, like for instance in the NFL, you have women referees and or whatever they're called, officials, I guess. But and like you can imagine, like there's thousands of people watching, and the pressure is so much on them. If they make a mistake, it's going to be like, oh no, it's everyone's going to say it's that women shouldn't be doing this job, and it's going to be it's going to make it into the media, and like I mean, sure there'll be some flack if a male makes a mistake too. There's always some flack, but not to the same extent. It would be, it's like, oh yeah, he's certainly made a mistake in this one, but a woman does it, and it's going to be like, oh, this is what we said: women don't belong, or women shouldn't do this job, and so the pressure is like mounted. So whenever you're some kind of belong to a minority group in whatever field, like where there's very low representation, the stereotype threat can exist and cause a decrement in performance because of the anxiety that it leads to. Okay, continuing on with stereotype threat. Stereotype groups perform worse than non-stereotype groups when they are being evaluated. Interventions to reduce the effects of stereotype threat are often successful. I'll just mention a couple. One, and both of these have been tried and shown to help. One is having the stereotype group before they do some kind of test to write about their personal values, and this, you know, this is meant to bolster their self-esteem and their view of themselves, so that it eliminates that anxiety about being a minority, and so you talk about, oh, how great your values are in your family and perhaps your culture and your history, and it's been shown to really help. A second one is that they found just informing um, the stereotyped students about stereotype threat and what it is and how it works, that actually we can help reduce stereotype threat, just teaching them about it. Okay, strengthening peer relations and social connections, like within a group. So, for instance, like a classroom or something, that can also help prevent stereotype threat. Um, you won't feel like others are judging you as much if there's more uh, bonding that within the group as a whole. There's substantial evidence that interventions to minimize the effects of stereotype threat can enhance performance of negatively stereotyped groups on academic tests. Stereotypes can lead to prejudice and discrimination. So drawing negative conclusions prior to evaluating the evidence is prejudice. Basically, in case anyone never made this connection of where the word comes from, it's prejudge. It's like prejudging. So prejudice, prejudge, and so you're drawing. When you demonstrate prejudice, you're drawing a conclusion prior to evaluating evidence. You're prejudging. It is prejudice is an attitude or a belief. Discrimination, on the other hand, is the act of treating members of outgroups differently from members of in-groups. In-groups are the groups you belong to, outgroups are others. But the important distinction I want to make is that discrimination is a behavior. So sometimes people just lump these words together, but prejudice is an attitude or belief. It's in your head, and in your feelings. Discrimination refers to, you've done a specific behavior, as far as treating some people different than others. Okay, so I used the word in group and out group, so let's look at them here. Those groups that we belong to are what we call in groups. Those that we do not belong to are out groups. Okay. People tend to identify strongly with the groups that they're a part of. In-group bias means that we favor those within our group over those outside it, and we tend to view those out-group members as all alike. For example, a heterosexual male may have the viewpoint that all gay males are promiscuous. So, the heterosexual male, he's part of the in-group of heterosexual males, and gay males would be part of the out-group. And so you tend to just kind of see the out-group members as all alike. They're all, they're all the same kind of thing. By the way, you see this in political discussions all the time. Oh, Republicans are all like this, or Democrats are all like this. Just kind of, it's a whole whitewash of the whole group of millions of people. That they're all the same in some way. Okay. According to social identity theory, our group memberships are an important part of how we view ourselves, and they contribute to your overall sense of self-esteem. If you feel good about the group you belong to, then you feel better about yourself. You are also likely to show favoritism to members of your in-group compared to out-group members. And this makes a lot of sense. I mean, for instance, your country of origin is one of your in-groups. I'm Canadian, and I'm very proud of it, and it does make me feel good about myself. And I really value Canada, and so it is an important part of how I view myself, and I probably do show some favoritism to fellow Canadians. I know, like, when I watch, I don't know, something like a competition show or something, and one, there's a bunch of Americans, and then there's one person who's a Canadian. Like, that's who I typically root for, just because they're from Canada. They're my in group. Okay. Continuing here. This is so I said you're likely to show favoritism to members of your in group. This is known as in group favoritism, and it's one consequence of categorizing people as in group or out group members. Strong in group favoritism even occurs if the groups are formed by chance. Your book talks about this a little bit, that one study where they just flipped a coin to determine which group each person would be in. So it's kind of like, imagine being in a classroom, and you flip a coin, and if it's heads, you're told to go to one group, and if it's tails, you go to a different group. And so just randomly forming groups, and then they what they do, they had the groups had to determine how to split up some money, between members of the classroom, and people, and all the people try to give more money to their own groups rather than the other groups. They try to deny them the out groups money, and and they were reminded at different points that, hey, remember, these groups are just randomly chosen. Like, it's like, they're your fellow classmates, whether they're in your group or not, when it's just a flip of a coin. And yet, like, just even in that condition where you randomly put into a certain group, like, you automatically start clinging to it, and wanting to do this in group favoritism. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. Okay, so social psychology, as it says here, may be able to offer strategies for promoting intergroup harmony and producing greater tolerance for outgroups. In the Sharif and colleagues 1961 Robbers Cave study, they had 22 well-adjusted fifth grade students. It was like it's like a summer camp kind of deal. And so they had 22 of them, fifth graders, and they split them into two groups, the Eagles and the Rattlers. And then they put them in a number of different competitions, group against group. And when competing against each other, it led to intense animosity between members of the two different groups. I mean, they apparently, like, they were getting to a point of really being nasty and angry towards the other members of the group. And remember, these are all fifth grade students that were just, once again, randomly split into two groups. But the competition fueled the animosity, and it fueled the feeling of in group versus out group. But then they created some situations where the two groups had to work together, and they made it look like these were just kind of accidental kind of situations. Like I think at one point a truck got stuck in a big mud hole or something, and it took all the kids together to help push it out, and so they had to, so they created these situations where the groups had to work together, and when they were forced to work together like that, they showed a dramatic decrease in their hostilities, and because they started to develop the attitude that we're all in this together. And this is kind of kind of a lesson that when people have to work together, it can it can kind of wipe away the lines between one group and another, and you can feel like you're part of the same team. Um, in the Jigsaw Classroom, developed by Elliot Aronson in the 1970s, students work together in either mixed race or mixed sex groups. Each student, has a small but essential task and to complete, and then all these each of these small tasks, they all fit together to complete a whole project. So like each you know each member of the group, it's like it's important that they do their little part, and you put them all together, and you get the whole project. And more than, as it says here, more than 800 studies of the Jigsaw Classroom have demonstrated that this program leads to more positive treatment of other ethnicities and results in decreases in racial prejudice. And once again, it's about, you have to work together. That's why they mix the groups. Like they have mixed race groups. So you know when you start working together, and you start depending on people, um, and once again you get that we're all in this together kind of feeling, um, the walls can break down. I mean, like the prejudice walls that may originally existed, or the stereotypes that may have existed. Um, so once again, take a look at that. More than 800 studies have been done on this Jigsaw Classroom idea. Like it's used quite a bit, and it really is a successful um, intervention, especially for if you start with children when they're young. And finally, perspective taking, thinking about what other people believe and how they feel can reduce bias and help smooth potentially awkward interactions. So perspective taking can help people overcome stereotypes. It just means, perspective taking is like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and really thinking about, well, what would it like to be, to be that person. And when people can actually do that, and um, once again, it can help them overcome stereotypes. And that will conclude learning objective 2.